Commander Park Ji-yoon stood before the massive viewing screen in the Mars orbital station, watching the alien ships materialize in the darkness of space. They were enormous, each vessel at least 3 times larger than Earth's biggest warships. The metal hulls gleamed with a strange purple light, and they moved with deliberate slowness, as if they owned the void itself. Dr. China worked frantically at her console, trying to establish communication. Her fingers danced across the holographic keyboard as waves of alien signals flooded their systems. She was the best xenolinguist humanity had recruited specifically for moments like this. The first contact protocols demanded patience and careful translation. Captain Lee Dong-hyun paced behind them, his hand never far from his sidearm. He had fought in the Mars colonial wars 20 years ago, and he knew predator behavior when he saw it. These ships were not exploring, they were hunting. The translation software finally locked onto a pattern. Mina's eyes widened as the words began appearing on her screen. She read them once, then twice, then looked up at Park with visible fear. Commander, they're broadcasting a message. It's being sent to every human settlement in the system. Park nodded slowly. Put it through. The voice that filled the command center was cold and mechanical, filtered through their translation systems, but the contempt in it needed no translation. Primitive species of Sol 3, you are hereby informed of your subjugation. The Velcron Dominion has observed your feeble attempts at colonization. You have expanded into 17 star systems in 200 cycles. This is unacceptable. We have conquered 47 species across 5,000 worlds. Your resistance would be meaningless. You will surrender your vessels, your worlds, and your autonomy. You have 1 solar rotation to comply. Silence filled the command center. Park felt every eye turn toward him. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Open a channel, he ordered. Mina hesitated, then activated the communication link. Park straightened his uniform and spoke clearly. This is Commander Park Ji-yoon of the United Earth Space Command. We receive your message, but we cannot accept your terms. Humanity seeks peaceful coexistence with all species. Perhaps we can discuss a diplomatic solution. We have resources we can share, knowledge we can exchange. There is no need for conflict. The response came almost immediately, and this time there was something new in the alien voice. Laughter. Your species speaks of peace. Because you are weak, we have studied your transmissions. You have no unified military. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. You offer negotiation because you fear obliteration. This is the response of prey, not equals. Lee Dong-hyun took a step forward, his face red with anger. Commander, let me speak to these. Park raised his hand, cutting him off. He kept his voice calm. We are not your enemies. Attacking us would be a mistake. We ask only for the chance to prove that cooperation benefits us both. The alien voice grew colder. You misunderstand your position. We do not negotiate with food animals. We do not bargain with resources. You are territory to be claimed. However, we are not without mercy. We will demonstrate the cost of resistance. On the viewing screen, 3 of the alien vessels broke formation. They accelerated with impossible speed toward the outer colonies. Park's blood ran cold. Mina, get me a line to the colony ships near Neptune now, but it was already too late. The alien vessels fired weapons that tore through space itself. Beams of energy that made the void shimmer and crack. 3 colony ships, massive vessels carrying 4,000 people. Each simply ceased to exist where they had been. Only expanding clouds of debris remained. 12,000 people, 12,000 civilians gone in seconds. The command center erupted in chaos. Officers shouted into their communicators. Alarms blared. Mina put her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. Lee punched a bulkhead hard enough to split his knuckles. Park stood perfectly still, watching the debris clouds expand. His mind was already moving, calculating, planning. He had spent 20 years maintaining peace in the colonies. He had negotiated with pirates, settled disputes between mining corporations, and prevented 3 civil wars through careful diplomacy. He believed in peace, but he also believed in survival. The alien voice returned, smug and satisfied. This is the fate of resistance. Comply within your solar rotation, or we will begin with your home world. The choice is yours. If such primitive creatures can be said to choose, the communication link cut off. The alien fleet remained in position, a clear threat hanging over humanity's home system. Park turned to his staff. Every face showed shock, grief, or rage, some combination of all 3. He let them have their moment, then spoke quietly but firmly. Send a priority transmission to Earth. Tell the Security Council what has happened here. Tell them the Velkrans have declared war on humanity. Lee looked up, blood dripping from his hand. What will Earth do? Park walked to the viewing screen and placed his palm against the cold glass. In the distance, he could still see the debris clouds where the colony ships had been. 12,000 souls who had been alive 5 minutes ago. 12,000 people who had trusted Earth to protect them. I don't know what Earth will do, Park said softly, but I know what we will do. We will make them regret this. Every single one of them. Mina looked at him with red eyes. Commander, they have 5,000 worlds. They've conquered 47 species. How can we? Possibly because they made a mistake. Park interrupted. They think diplomacy is weakness. They think peace means cowardice. They've never fought a species that chose peace not because we were weak, but because we knew the cost of war. He turned to face his crew. Now they'll learn what we've always known. War is what humans do best. We just chose not to until now. He activated the station-wide intercom. His voice carried to every deck, every soldier, every officer. This is Commander Park. As of now, we are at war. Send the message to every human settlement, every ship, every colony. Tell them to prepare. Tell them we're coming. And someone get me Admiral Kang. On Earth, we have work to do. Admiral Kangsuman stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing every human settlement across 17 star systems. She had served in Earth's military for 40 years, rising through the ranks during peacetime. Now, at 63 years old, she would lead humanity into its first interstellar war. The Velkrans expected surrender. They had given humanity 24 hours to comply. Instead, Earth went completely silent. For 30 days, no human ship transmitted. No colony responded to hails. The Velkrans assumed terror had paralyzed their prey. They were wrong. In those 30 days, humanity transformed. Every civilian factory retold for war. Production. Mining lasers designed to cut asteroids were modified to slice through armor. Cargo rail guns built to launch ore containers were recalibrated to fire tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. Fusion drives meant for propulsion became devastating bombs. Engineer Yun Tai-jin worked 18-hour days in Earth's lunar shipyards, stripping luxury liners and converting them into carriers. He took pleasure cruise vessels and filled them with fighter bays. He took cargo haulers and mounted missile batteries along their spines. Nothing was wasted. Every ship became a weapon. Admiral, the shipyards report 80% conversion complete. An aide informed Kang, we in LT Unk and GT LL have 200 combat-capable vessels within the week. Kang studied the tactical displays, 200 ships against a fleet of thousands. The numbers were impossible, but she had learned long ago that numbers were just one factor in warfare. What about the volunteer fighters, she asked. 17,000 applications. We can only train 5,000. Immediately, among those 5,000 was Lieutenant Han Jai-woo, a 24-year-old pilot who had grown up racing mining shuttles through Saturn's rings. She had reflexes that tested off the charts and a fearlessness that worried her instructors. When the call for volunteers went out, she was the first to sign. On day 31, the Velkrans grew impatient. Their fleet entered the outer solar system, making directly for the colony on Ganymede. They expected to find frightened civilians huddled in their habitats. Instead, they found Lieutenant Han and Clear's throat, 200 fighters waiting in the shadows of Jupiter's moons. The Velkran commander barely had time to register the ambush before human fighters swarmed his vanguard. Han piloted her craft through the enemy formation, her weapons tearing into shields and armor. The Velkrans had superior ships, but they fought in rigid formations. Following doctrine developed over centuries, humans fought like demons. Han rolled her fighter between two Velkran destroyers, firing as she went, then dove into Jupiter's upper atmosphere to shake pursuit. 3 enemy fighters followed, none emerged. She used the gas giant's gravity and storms to her advantage, drawing the aliens into zones where their advanced sensors became useless. But courage and skill could only do so much against overwhelming force. For every Velkran ship destroyed, humans lost 10 fighters. Han watched friends die in bright explosions. She heard their final screams over the comm channels, but nobody retreated. Commander Park arrived with the Mars Defense Fleet 6 hours into the battle. His ships were outnumbered 3-1, but he had spent weeks studying the recordings of the Velkran attack. He noticed patterns in their movements, predictable responses to specific threats. All ships pattern Delta 7. He ordered calmly, drive straight through their center line. Don't engage until you're past their front vessels. His captains trusted him. The human fleet accelerated directly at the Velkran formation, ignoring the withering fire. Ships died, their crews screaming, but the survivors burst through the enemy line and fired into the Velkrans from behind, where their shields were weaker. The Velkran formation shattered. For 10 crucial minutes, human forces held the advantage. They poured fire into enemy vessels, targeting engines and weapons. Captain Lee Dong-yun led a boarding party onto a damaged Velkran cruiser, fighting through corridors while the Ship vented atmosphere, then Velcrin. Reinforcements arrived, 50 fresh. Warships jumped into the system. Park recognized defeat and ordered withdrawal. All ships scatter pattern. Use the asteroid belt, make them chase. The retreat was costly. Half of Park's fleet didn't make it. Han limped back to Mars with her fighter, barely holding together, but they had done something the Velcrins never expected. They had hurt the enemy in the Velcrin flagship. The commander studied casualty reports with growing confusion. They had won the battle, the humans had fled, but the Velcrins had lost 15 ships, completely destroyed, and 30 more damaged. Against primitive vessels with inferior technology, how, he demanded of his tactical officer, they fight without pattern. Commander, they sacrifice themselves to achieve objectives. They use terrain we would consider impassable. They adapt their tactics real time rather than following doctrine. It's chaos is inefficient. Chaos cannot defeat order, but the tactical officer said nothing, staring at the casualty numbers. Back on Earth, Admiral King received Park's report. She studied the battle recordings carefully, taking notes. The Velcrins were powerful but predictable. They had protocols for everything. That predictability was a weakness. Engineer Yun, she called. Yun appeared on the comm screen, exhausted but alert. I need you to design something specific. I need weapons that learn missiles with artificial intelligence that adapt to enemy counter measures. Can you do it? Yun smiled grimly. Give me 2 weeks. Across human space, the survivors of Ganymede were hailed as heroes, but more importantly, humanity learned. Every battle recording was analyzed. Every Velcrin tactic was studied. Every weakness was cataloged. Lieutenant Han met with other surviving pilots, sharing techniques. She had noticed that Velcrin fighters couldn't match human reflexes. In chaotic environments, their pilots were skilled but followed training too rigidly. Humans were sloppier but more creative. We need to fight dirty, she told her squadron. Use everything, the asteroids, the planets, the gas giants, make them chase us into places where their better ships don't matter. Meanwhile, intelligence officer Kim Jun-ho was already executing a different kind of mission. He had been inserted onto a captured human cargo vessel that the Velcrins had taken intact, while his fellow prisoners distracted the guards. Kim carefully copied data from the Velcrin ships computers. The data contained fleet positions, supply routes, and communication protocols. But more valuable than any of that was what it revealed about Velcrin psychology. They had never faced a species that refused to surrender. Every other race had submitted after the first demonstration of force. Humans were supposed to be easy prey. Instead, they had become something the Velcrins had no doctrine for: an enemy that learned from defeat, an enemy that adapted faster than they could respond, an enemy that fought like cornered animals with nothing left to lose. Because that's exactly what humanity was. Admiral Kang studied Kim's intelligence reports and began planning something audacious. The Velcrins had supply depots scattered through the outer systems. They were lightly guarded because they had never been threatened before. Commander Park, she said over the secure channel. How would you like to actually hurt them? Park smiled for the first time in weeks. Tell me where to strike, Admiral. My people are ready. Scientist Oh Han Woo had not slept properly in 43 days. His laboratory on Luna had become his entire world, surrounded by fragments of destroyed Velcrin ships and stolen technology. Every piece told a story, and O was determined to read them all. The Velcrin shields were the key. They could absorb incredible amounts of damage, regenerating faster than human weapons could break them down, but O had a theory: everything that regenerated needed time, even if just milliseconds. He fired a test laser at a salvaged shield generator. The barrier glowed, absorbed the hit, then flickered for exactly 3 seconds before restoring to full strength. O fired again during that flicker. The beam went straight through. "Got you," he whispered. Within a week, Engineer Yun had redesigned human weapons to fire in precise bursts timed to that vulnerability. The new rifles fired once, waited 3 seconds, then fired again. It was awkward and strange, but it worked. Velcrin shields that had seemed invincible suddenly became manageable. Colonel Bei Sununhe was training the first units of Marines. Equipped with these new weapons, she had spent 20 years in special operations and knew that equipment alone never won battles soldiers did. Again she shouted as her Marines practiced boarding maneuvers in the zero-gravity training facility. "The Velcrins are bigger and stronger than you, but they evolved on heavy-gravity worlds. They're slower in space. Use that, move fast. Strike hard and keep moving." Her Marines learned to flow through corridors like water, using the three-dimensional nature of shipboard combat to their advantage. Velcrin soldiers fought like they were still on solid ground. Humans learned to attack from above, below, and every angle in between. Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Kim Jun-ho had infiltrated deeper into Velcrin networks than anyone thought possible. He had been captured deliberately, allowing himself to be taken to a prison ship. Once aboard, he used the stolen access codes to move freely through the vessel's computer systems. What he found changed everything. The Velcrins kept detailed records of every species they had conquered. Kim read through files on 47 different civilizations, each one broken and absorbed into the Dominion. But there was a pattern. Every species had surrendered within 3 months of first contact. Every single one. The Velcrins had no experience with prolonged warfare. They had no concept of an enemy that would keep fighting after losing battles. Their entire military doctrine was built on quick, overwhelming victories followed by occupation. Kim transmitted his findings back to Earth, then continued digging. He found fleet schedules, supply manifests, and communication protocols. But the most valuable discovery was a complete database of Velcrin ship designs, including their newest dreadnought class. That dreadnought would be passing through an outer system in 6 days. Lightly escorted, arrogant Admiral Kang saw the opportunity immediately. "Commander Park, I'm giving you everything we have. Take that ship. Don't destroy it, capture it." Park assembled every available vessel for the operation. It was insane. The dreadnought was 3 km long, armed with weapons that could vaporize planets, but it would be alone for exactly 8 hours during its transit. Captain Lee Dong-yun volunteered to lead the boarding operation. Colonel Bei gave him 200 of her best Marines. Oh Hun-woo provided them with the new phase rifles, and Lieutenant Han would lead the fighter screen to keep enemy reinforcements away. They called it Operation Defiance. The trap was set near a dense asteroid field. When the Velcrin dreadnought entered the system, it found what appeared to be a small human fleet of 20 ships, easy prey. The Velcrin commander ordered his escorts to attack the human ships scattered into the asteroids. The Velcrin escorts followed just as Park had predicted. Hands fighters swarmed them from hidden positions, using the asteroids for cover. It was chaos, beautiful chaos, and the Velcrin struggled to adapt while the escorts were distracted. Park brought his real fleet out of hiding behind a small moon. 50 ships, everything humanity could spare, accelerated toward the dreadnought. The alien vessel was massive and powerful, but it was designed to fight other warships in open space. Park didn't give it that chance. His ship surrounded it, moving too close for the main weapons to track effectively. They hammered at specific points on the hull, targeting docking bays and hangar doors. Marines, you're up. Park transmitted. Lee's assault shuttles screamed toward the breach sections. Velcrin point defense fire destroyed half of them, but the survivors slammed into the hull and locked on. BAs. Marines poured into the ship, their phase rifles tearing through Velcrin shields and armor. The fighting inside was brutal. Velcrin soldiers were 2 m tall, heavily armored, and fought ferociously, but they fought in straight lines, holding choke points like they were defending fortresses. Bays. Marines used the ceiling vents, crawled through maintenance shafts, and attacked from unexpected angles. They moved in small teams, hitting hard and fading away. Before the Velcrins could respond, it was guerrilla warfare in 3 dimensions. Lee led the push toward the bridge. His squad lost 15 Marines, fighting through 5 decks of ship. Every corridor was a killing ground. Every intersection was a death trap, but they kept moving forward. Oh Hun-Woo had analyzed the dreadnought's design and found its weakness. The bridge was heavily armored but relied on a single main power conduit. Lee's demolition expert placed a shaped charge against the bulkhead and blew it precisely. The bridge went dark. Emergency lights flickered on, but the tactical systems were dead. Lee and his remaining 8 Marines stormed in. Velcrin command crew was still reeling from the explosion. The battle was short and savage, fought at point-blank range. When it ended, Lee stood over the Velcrin captain's body, breathing hard, his armor scorched and dented. Bridge secured, he transmitted. Ship is ours. Outside, Hands fighters were running out of ammunition and fuel, but they held the perimeter. The Velcrin escorts, realizing what had happened, tried to disengage and flee. Park let them go. He had what he wanted. The captured dreadnought was renamed Defiance. Over the next month, human engineers and scientists swarmed over every centimeter of the ship. They learned how Velcrin shields worked, how their weapons operated, and most importantly, how their faster-than-light drives functioned. Engineer Yun studied the FTL drive with fascination. It was more advanced than human technology, but it was also inefficient, built with assumptions about resource availability that humanity couldn't match. So Yun redesigned it, making it smaller, faster, and more efficient. The improved human FTL drives were 15% faster than the Velcrin versions. Suddenly, humanity could outrun their enemies. Oh, Hun-Woo cracked the secrets of Velcrin communications. He learned how to intercept their transmissions and, more importantly, how to fake them. Human intelligence could now listen to enemy fleet movements in real time. Dr. Choi Mina studied the cultural database. Kim Jun-ho had stolen. She learned that the Velkrans viewed themselves as inherently superior, chosen by destiny to rule. They had never questioned this belief because they had never needed to. Every species had confirmed their superiority by surrendering. Humans were different. Humans didn't surrender. Humans learned from every mistake. Humans adapted faster than the Velkrans could adjust their strategies. Admiral Kang assembled all the intelligence, all the new weapons, and all the captured technology. She looked at the star maps showing Velkran territory and saw not an empire but a target. Gentlemen and ladies, she addressed her staff, for 3 months we have been reacting, we have been defending. That ends now. It's time we taught the Velkrans what real war looks like. We're an LT Unk and GT taking the fight to them. Commander Park stood beside the Admiral, looking at the same maps. Where do we strike first? Kang smiled coldly. Everywhere, Captain Lee. Dong Hun stood on the bridge of the Defiance, the captured Velkran dreadnought, now flying human colors. The massive ship responded smoothly to his commands, its power humming through every deck. Around him, a crew of 2,000 humans operated stations originally designed for aliens. Having spent weeks learning every system, the ship was not just a trophy, it was a statement. Humanity could take the Velkrans' best and make it their own. Operation Backfire began at dawn on Earth, though dawn meant nothing in space. Admiral Kang had divided humanity's forces into 12 strike groups. Each would hit a different Velkran target simultaneously, spread across 1,000 light years. The goal was not to hold territory but to make the Velkrans understand fear. Lee's group jumped into the Velkran mining system of Tarth. The system was lightly defended, meant only to process asteroids for raw materials. 3 Velkran destroyers orbited the main facility, lazy and confident. They died before they finished sending a distress signal. The Defiance's weapons, now crewed by humans who had studied every manual and improved every system, tore through the first destroyer in seconds. The improved phase rifles Hun Woo had designed made Velkran shields almost useless. Lee didn't give them time to adapt. All fighters launch, he ordered. Target the mining platforms. Lieutenant Han led her squadron out of the Defiance's hangar bays. She had been promoted after her actions at Ganymede and now commanded 300 pilots. Her fighters swept through the system like a swarm of angry insects, destroying refineries and fuel depots. The Velkran stationed there barely had time to evacuate. Those who made it to escape pods were allowed to flee. Lee had his orders from Admiral Kang. Let them run, let them spread the word. Humanity was coming. Across Velkran space, 11 other battles erupted. Commander Park led a raid on a communications hub, destroying the Velkran's ability to coordinate fleet movements in an entire sector. Colonel Bay's Marines assaulted an ammunition depot, detonating enough explosives to light up the night sky of 2 nearby planets. Engineer Yun's new weapons proved devastatingly effective. Hellfire torpedoes he had designed carried artificial intelligence that learned from each engagement. When Velkran ships deployed countermeasures, the torpedoes adapted in real time, finding new attack vectors. The first few got intercepted. The next wave adjusted their approach. By the third salvo, they were unstoppable, but the most important operation was being conducted by Intelligence Officer Kim Jun-ho. He had established a network of human agents deep in Velcrin territory using captured communication protocols to move freely through their systems. Kim was now aboard a Velcrin supply ship disguised as crew stealing data on fleet deployments and military strength. What he found shocked him. The Velcrin Dominion was not as strong as they pretended. Yes, they controlled 5,000 worlds, but most of those worlds were populated by vassal species, conquered civilizations kept in line through fear. The actual Velcrin population numbered only a few billion, spread thin across their empire. They ruled through intimidation and the myth of invincibility, a myth humanity was systematically destroying. Kim transmitted his findings to Earth, then went deeper. He learned that several vassal species were quietly watching humanity's resistance. Some were starting to ask dangerous questions. If humans could fight back, why couldn't they? The Velcrin High Command recognized the threat. They assembled their largest fleet, 800 warships under their most experienced admiral. They would crush the human home world and end this rebellion before it inspired others. Dr. Choi Mina intercepted the Velcrin fleet orders and warned Earth. Admiral Kang studied the enemy deployment and saw opportunity where others saw disaster. They're committing everything to one strike, she observed. That means they're leaving other areas weak. Commander Park, how fast can you reach the Velcrin home world's moon? Park checked the tactical display with the improved FTL drives. 18 hours, but Admiral, we don't have the forces to threaten their home world. We don't need to threaten it, we just need them to think we are. The plan was insane. While the Velcrin Armada moved toward Earth, humanity's fleet would strike at the heart of the Dominion, not to conquer, but to terrify, to make the Velcrins realize nowhere was safe. Lee's defiance led the charge, accompanied by every ship humanity could spare. They jumped into the Velcrin home system, expecting to face heavy resistance. Instead, they found minimal defenses. The Velcrins had been so confident in their assault on Earth that they had stripped their own protection. All ships, Lee commanded, spread out, target military installations only, no civilian structures. Make noise, make them see us. Human ships swept past the Velcrin homeworld's moon, firing on orbital shipyards and military stations. The installations were destroyed with precision, but the message was clear. Humanity could reach anywhere. Lieutenant Hans fighters danced through the orbital defenses, destroying satellites and weapons platforms. She led her squadron in a daring run across the moon's surface, flying low enough that the wash from their engines carved lines in the dust. Velcrin civilians on their home world watched the human attack with disbelief. The species they had dismissed as primitive prey was now attacking their homes. The invincible Dominion was bleeding. The Velcrin fleet commander received word of the attack and faced an impossible choice: continue to Earth and destroy humanity's home world while losing his own, or return to defend the capital and allow Earth to fortify. He chose to turn back. Massive Velcrin Armada reversed course, abandoning their attack. On Earth, Admiral Kang watched the enemy fleet turn away and allowed herself a small smile. Signal all ships, Operation Backfire is complete. returned to defensive positions. But the war was far from over. The Velkrin High Command was panicking, issuing contradictory orders. Their vassal species were watching, whispering, if the Velkrins could be hurt, could they be defeated on a world called Drethus, a conquered species that had served the Velkrins for 3 centuries began to quietly sabotage supply shipments on Karith dock. Workers slowed their pace, making Velkrin ships wait for repairs. The Velkrins tried to crack down, but their forces were already stretched thin, fighting humanity. They couldn't be everywhere at once. Colonel Bay trained the first volunteers from these vassal species in guerrilla tactics. She taught them what humans had learned: how to hit hard and fade away, how to use the enemy's size and strength against them, how to turn fear into fury. Engineer Yun shared human technology with the resistance groups. Not weapons but tools, communication systems that couldn't be intercepted, codes that couldn't be broken, the means to coordinate across light years. Velkrin Empire, built over millennia, began to crack, not from military defeat but from the idea humanity represented, the idea that the strong could be resisted, the idea that submission was not inevitable. In the Velkrin throne room, the Emperor received reports of defeats, rebellions, and disasters. His advisors argued about strategies while his empire crumbled around them. How he demanded, how does one species undo 5,000 years of dominance in mere months? Nobody had an answer. The Velkrins had conquered 47 species, but they had never fought anyone who refused to stay conquered. They had won every war, but they had never understood warfare itself. Humanity did. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting themselves, learning every possible way to wage war. The Velkrins were powerful. Humans were experienced, and experience was winning. The Velkrin Empire, shattered like glass dropped from a great height. What had taken millennia to build collapsed in less than 2 years, not through conquest but through revelation. The vassal species, seeing humanity's refusal to kneel, found their own courage. Commander Park watched from the bridge of his flagship as 3 former Velkrin colony worlds declared independence. Their defense forces, trained and equipped by humans, were already engaging Velkron ships sent to restore order. The battles were messy and desperate, but the vassal species were learning what humanity already knew: freedom was worth dying for. Admiral Kang wants us at the Velkrin throne world, his communications officer reported. The final push begins in 6 hours. Park looked at the star map. Velkrin home world lay before them, defended by what remained of their once mighty fleet. 200 ships, maybe fewer, a fraction of their former strength. The rest were scattered across the empire, fighting rebellions, chasing human raiders, or simply destroyed. Captain Li Dong Yan prepared the Defiance for battle. His crew had fought in 30 engagements over the past year. They knew the ship better than its original builders. Every system had been improved, refined, and adapted to human needs. How are we feeling? Li asked his bridge crew. A young ensign looked up from her station. Sir, we're about to attack the home world of the species that tried to exterminate us. I feel absolutely wonderful. Li laughed. It was harsh but honest. They had earned this moment with blood and sacrifice. Lieutenant Han conducted final checks on her fighter. She had painted small marks on her cockpit, 1. For each kill, there were 83 marks. She didn't feel pride in that number, just grim satisfaction. Each mark represented one less Velcron ship that could threaten humanity. The human fleet assembled at the edge of the Velcron home system. 500 warships. Everything humanity and their allies could gather. It was still smaller than what the Velcrons had commanded at their peak, but size no longer mattered. Admiral Kang transmitted to the entire fleet. All ships. This is the final battle. The Velcron started this war by massacring our civilians. They believed we were weak. They believed we would surrender. They were wrong. Today we end this. But remember, we fight for justice, not genocide. Military targets only. Am I clear? A chorus of acknowledgments answered her. The battle began at dawn. On Earth, though the Velcron home world measured time differently, the human fleet jumped in system and spread out in formations the Velcrons couldn't predict or counter. Park had studied every recorded Velcron battle. He knew how they thought, how they reacted, what they feared. He used all of it against them. The Velcron defense fleet tried to form their traditional defensive sphere around their home world. Park didn't attack it directly. Instead, he sent Lee's Defiance and a strike group wide, forcing the Velcrons to stretch their formation. Then he hit the weak point with overwhelming force. Hands fighters exploited the gaps, diving through Velcron lines to strike at command. Ships, the Hellfire torpedoes engineer Yun had designed, proved devastating. Velcron point defenses designed to stop conventional missiles couldn't adapt fast enough to the learning weapons, but the Velcrons fought desperately. This was their home. For all their arrogance and cruelty, they were still defending their families. Their ships threw themselves at human forces with suicide courage. The battle raged for 18 hours. Space filled with debris and frozen bodies. Both sides paid heavily. Park lost 60 ships. Lee's Defiance took damage that would take months to repair. Han watched squadron mates die, protecting the fleet, but slowly. Inevitably, the Velcron defense collapsed. Their ships were destroyed or disabled. Their orbital fortresses went silent. The path to the surface lay open. Colonel Bay, Admiral Kang transmitted. BA's assault shuttles descended through the atmosphere, protected by human fighters. The Velcron capital city sprawled below them, beautiful and ancient. The Marines didn't target civilians. They made directly for the government complex. Velcron ground forces tried to stop them. The fighting in the streets was brutal and close range, but BA's Marines had trained in zero gravity, in vacuum, in every possible environment. Fighting in normal gravity with atmosphere was easy by comparison. They stormed the high council chambers 6 hours after landing. The Velcron counselors were still there, protected by their best guards. The battle inside the chamber was short. When it ended, Ba stood before the Velcron Emperor himself. He was old, his scales dulled with age. He looked at Ba with genuine confusion. How? He asked, in his own language, which her translator rendered instantly. How did you do this? How did you do this, Doctor? Choi Mina entered the chamber. She had insisted on being present for this moment. She approached the Emperor carefully, her weapons lowered but ready. You want to know how? She asked. You made a simple mistake. You mistook our desire for peace as an inability to wage war. The Emperor shook his head. We have conquered 47 Species. We have fought for 5,000 years. No. Mina corrected gently. You've won 47 times against species who surrendered. You've never actually fought a war, not a real one. Humanity has been fighting ourselves for our entire history. We know war in ways you never could. Every human culture has warrior traditions going back thousands of years. We chose peace not because we were weak, but because we finally understood the cost. She stepped closer. You attacked civilians to demonstrate your power. You thought it would terrify us into submission. Instead, you showed us that peace with you was impossible. You gave us no choice but to fight. And when humans have no choice, we don't surrender, we win. Intelligence officer Kim Junho emerged from the shadows where he had been standing. The Emperor's eyes widened, recognizing him. You were the prisoner. Kim smiled slightly. I was never really captured. Everything you thought you knew about humanity was what I wanted you to know. Every piece of intelligence you received was filtered through my networks. You never fought humans. You fought the enemy I wanted you to see. The Emperor slumped. What now? Will you exterminate us as we planned to exterminate you? Admiral Kang entered the chamber, flanked by Commander Park and Captain Lee. She looked at the Emperor with cold eyes. No, she said, we're not you. Here are our terms. Complete disarmament of your military, reparations to the species you conquered, and to humanity. A 100-year protectorate where human forces will oversee your government to ensure compliance, and every single species you enslaved will be granted independence. The Emperor looked at her in disbelief. You would let us live after what we did? We don't wage war for revenge. Kang replied. We fight for survival and justice. You're no longer a threat, so you no longer need to die, but you will answer for your crimes, and you will spend the next century learning to live as equals instead of conquerors. The treaty was signed within a week. The Velcrin Empire ceased to exist. In its place, dozens of new nations emerged. Species finally free after centuries of subjugation. Engineer Yun spent the next decade sharing human technology with these new civilizations. Not weapons, but tools for building and healing, faster than light travel, advanced medicine, clean energy. Lieutenant Han became an instructor, teaching young pilots from a dozen species the tactics that had won humanity's war. Her students called her the legend. She told them there were no legends, only people who refused to quit. 10 years after the war ended, Ambassador Park Ji-yoon sat in a diplomatic meeting with representatives from a newly contacted species. They were advanced, powerful, and curious about the galactic community. Their leader looked at Park with cautious respect. We have heard stories of what happened to the Velcrins. Is it true? Did your species defeat an empire of 5,000 worlds? Park sipped his tea calmly. We defeated an empire that forgot humility. The worlds were just a number. How long did the war last? 2 years and 3 months from first contact to final surrender. The alien leader's eyes widened. That is incredibly fast. The Velcrins had conquered for millennia. They had won for millennia. Park corrected. There's a difference. Winning is easy when nobody fights back. War is what happens when someone does, and humans are good at war. Park set down his tea. Humans are good at survival. We've spent 10,000 years fighting diseases, disasters, wild animals, and each other. We learn To adapt or die, we chose adaptation. War is just one more problem to solve. Should we fear you then? Park smiled. Slightly. Only if you attack us, we prefer peace. Ambassador. We've seen enough war to last 1,000 lifetimes, but if you force us to choose between peace and survival, we'll choose survival every time, and we're very good at surviving. The alien ambassador was quiet for a moment. That is a good answer. We will remember it. Please do. Park said because if there's one lesson the Velkrans learned, it's this: attacking humanity is a mistake you only make once. Years later, the story of humanity's war became legend across the galaxy, not as a tale of conquest but as a warning. Dozens of species learned from it. Aggression became less common, diplomacy more valued. The Velkrans themselves, disarmed and humbled, slowly rebuilt their civilization. Their young learned a new history, one that included their own crimes and failures. Some humans advocated for harsher punishment. Others, like Dr. Choi Mina, worked with Velkran scholars to build understanding. They can change, Mina told critics, just as we did. Humanity was violent for thousands of years before we learned peace. We can't deny others the chance to grow. The galaxy was not perfect. New conflicts arose, but the question that started wars had changed. It was no longer can we win, but is it worth the cost? And for most species, after seeing what humanity had done, the answer was no. The lesson had been learned. War against humanity was a mistake made only once.